They flagged her account for suspicious activity. That's what the report said. Not we apologize. Not we made a mistake. Just suspicious. But if you rewind to 11:07 that morning, all she did was walk in. The glass doors sighed shut behind her. Inside, it smelled like lemon polish and printer ink. Cool air hit her skin like static. The marble floors gleamed like they'd been scrubbed an hour ago, and the overhead LEDs hummed just loud enough to notice if you were tense. She didn't rush, didn't hesitate. A navy silk blouse, dark gray slacks, heels that tapped, not stomped. No jewelry, no perfume, no handbag. Just a phone in one hand and an old leather wallet in the other. She stepped up to the counter and smiled, calm and quiet. "Hi," she said. "I'd like to make a withdrawal." She didn't say how much. Welcome to Unveiled Wealth, where every story unmasks what power tries to hide. She didn't walk like someone looking for attention. She walked like someone who'd learned to command it without asking. Her shoulders didn't bounce. Her steps didn't rush. Her spine held straight like a silent refusal to shrink. Navy blouse, pressed gray trousers, low heels with rubber soles that made her movements almost soundless. Like she knew this place wasn't worth giving her echo. Her face wasn't done up, but sharp. Brows defined, lips bare, eyes that didn't scan, they locked. And she didn't carry a purse. Just a phone and a wallet, gripped like she didn't expect to be holding them long. There was nothing flashy about her, but nothing forgettable either. She looked like someone people don't notice until they've already made a mistake. The bank looked bigger than it was. Glass doors that barely made a sound when they shut. Lighting that was too white to feel warm. The kind that made every surface look exposed. The floor was fake marble but polished like it mattered. Behind the front counter, two tellers worked in practiced silence. One nodded to a man in a construction vest. The other stamped something without looking up. A loan officer drifted in circles with a headset, fake laughing into the mic like she'd practiced the laugh more than the pitch. A security guard leaned too hard into the wall, pretending not to watch but tracking every motion like a bored hawk. Near the potted plant, an intern tapped his phone under the desk, gum popping softly every 10 seconds. It smelled like laminate, printer ink, and too much air freshener, trying to hide the fact that banks never really feel human. Everything moved, but it moved defensively, like a showroom that had memorized the script but didn't believe the sale. The woman stepped forward, not a loud step, but it landed heavier than it should have. One of the tellers glanced up, started the usual scan. Shoes, sorcerina manso. Pants, wekenso. A fresh shame. Face, wallet, a timony mountain. Pause. A smile came up half a second too late. "Hi there," she said, fingers tapping the keyboard but eyes not leaving the woman's face. "Do you have an account with us?" It was polite, but there was something rehearsed in the way she said us, like she'd been trained to emphasize inclusion but didn't know what to do when it felt challenged. The woman nodded. "Business account, under LMM Holdings." Her voice was crisp, steady, not loud, not soft, just clear, the kind of tone that makes people check themselves if they're paying attention. But the teller didn't blink. Her hand stopped typing. Her pupils shifted not to the screen, but to the security guard, then to the intern, then back to the woman. "Monsieur Derdomo. Can I see some identification?" she asked, still smiling. But now the smile looked more like insurance than welcome. The woman didn't move, didn't reach for her wallet. She just held the teller's gaze, not challenging, just waiting. And in that waiting, something in the room changed. A stillness, like someone had just unplugged the air vents. You could almost hear the quiet blink of the fluorescent lights above. The teller's fingers hovered above the keyboard, but didn't type. Her eyes moved, not to the monitor, but sideways. Quick, like a reflex, first to the security guard, who hadn't moved an inch, but whose jaw now tensed slightly. Then to the small mirror above the exit where she could check angles without turning her head. She smiled again, wider this time. Too wide to be natural. The kind of smile people wear when they're trying to keep the room still. "Sorry, ma'am, do you have a government-issued ID?" she asked, her tone light, voice lifted at the end like it was a casual question. But her shoulders betrayed the tone, stiff, slightly raised, like they'd braced for pushback. The woman didn't react, not a twitch. She simply looked at her, and that made the pause louder. The teller cleared her throat. Barely. Just standard procedure, she added, hands finally making contact with the keyboard, but only to open a generic screen that didn't really need to be accessed yet. Her nails tapped with uneven rhythm, not from habit, but from focus. She was stalling, buying time without making it look like hesitation. Behind her, the loan officer had slowed her walk. The guard hadn't stepped forward, but his eyes had narrowed. And the intern at the front, he'd lowered his phone under the desk. But now he wasn't tapping, he was watching. The teller leaned slightly forward, not enough to invade space, just enough to feel like control. We've just had a few situations lately, she said, soft but definite, the way someone might talk about shoplifting without using the word. Just need to be extra careful. Hope you understand. She didn't blink when she said it, but her hand was resting near the drawer that held the silent alarm. Her index finger curled just enough to make you wonder if she was trained to touch it without looking. It wasn't what she said, it was how she said it. Every syllable dipped in sugar, every gesture lined in caution. She wasn't being rude, she was being safe. And somehow, that felt colder. She didn't sigh, didn't frown, didn't even shift her weight. But something about her stillness became louder, like silence with a pulse. Her fingers rested on the edge of the counter, and you could see the skin on her knuckles tighten. Not enough to shake, but enough to press color out of them. The marble surface beneath her palm felt colder now, colder and sticky, like it had just been wiped down with something chemical. Her eyes, still locked on the teller, didn't narrow, but they stopped blinking as often. That pause between blinks became a sentence. Her jaw stayed relaxed, but her lips parted slightly, not to speak, just to breathe deeper, slower, the kind of breath you take when you're choosing not to say what you want to say. The teller was still talking, explaining things that didn't need explaining, adding words to fill the space she'd already made uncomfortable. It's not personal, she said. We just have policies. You know, and sometimes these systems get weird, so we have to double-check things, especially for business accounts. Her voice trailed off, waiting for approval that didn't come. The woman gave her none. No nod, no smile, nothing. She looked past her, for the first time, to the side wall where the branch's community board hung a cork panel full of outdated flyers, faded ink, and one photo of a smiling man holding an oversized check. She stared at that wall for 2 seconds, too long, then back to the teller. The rent can have showing true. You said this was standard. Her voice was still soft, but something about the way the words landed felt sharper now, like paper edges. The teller opened her mouth, but nothing came out. The woman's fingers tapped once against the counter, just once, like a metronome had started in her mind. And this was beat 1. In that moment, it wasn't just discomfort. It was the beginning of disappointment, not the kind you scream about, the kind that settles, the kind that grows legs and stays. She tilted her head slightly, just enough to make you think she was listening more closely than she let on. Not confused, not insulted, just curious, but the kind of curiosity that made everyone else in the room feel like they'd missed something. Her eyes moved not quickly, not wide, but with a pace that felt measured, like she was calculating a formula in her head and had almost reached the answer. They flicked once to the teller's badge, then to the corner of the monitor, then back to the teller. Too quick to be rude, too specific to be random. Her mouth stayed relaxed, but the corners tugged just a touch, like she was about to smile at a joke no one else had heard yet. She hadn't raised her voice, hadn't moved her feet, but the room began to feel smaller anyway. The security guard stood straighter. The intern's eyes were now fixed, pretending not to be. The teller licked her lips and tried to keep her voice smooth. Is everything okay, ma'am? The woman didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked down at nothing in particular, then back up as if she had just remembered something important. Everything's fine, she said. But there was something about how she said fine, like it meant something else, like it was the kind of fine that precedes a chess move. Her phone buzzed once in her hand. She didn't flinch, didn't even look at the screen, just slid her thumb across the side and silenced it without breaking eye contact. That alone made the teller shift her weight again, the way people do when they're trying not to look intimidated. The woman's breathing was steady. Too steady. The kind that doesn't belong to someone uncertain. The kind that belongs to someone waiting. Waiting for someone else to realize they've made a mistake. Or to finish making it. She didn't say who she was. She didn't need to. The walls already had, right above the check-in table near the window, a brushed brass plaque sat quietly under a soft spotlight. Most people walked past it, but her eyes flicked toward it just once, and stayed there. Suriname Neverforn, 5 names engraved. 4 men, surely one unwritten. 1 woman, Riyadu, and her name still there, still centered. The font hadn't faded, just people's memory had. Across from the plaque, a framed photo hung a ribbon-cutting day. Balloons, Amwani Wenchinsamanas, a banner, a banker grinning too wide, and her, holding a giant check like she was doing it for someone else. She wasn't in a suit back then either. Same blouse, and unassuredness, same stillness. The only difference was the camera flash, and the fact that everyone was looking. That check had funded 12 small business grants, 6 financial education workshops, 3 new internship programs. It was written under the name LMM Holdings. And now, 2 years later, she had to spell it out again to a teller who typed slowly, like the letters didn't ring a bell. Her face hadn't changed. Maybe the lighting was harsher today. Or maybe people only remember generosity when it's loud. She didn't remind them. Didn't reach for the plaque. Didn't say, "That's me." She just stood there, letting the space speak, letting silence ask the question they couldn't name. Who is she? Why does she seem so familiar? In another version of this lobby, same tiles, same windows. Just warmer light, she'd stood beside a teenage girl in a blue hoodie. The girl held a folder full of sketches for a mobile app. Her voice had trembled. Her hands had ink smudges on the fingertips. And the woman, this same woman now being questioned, had leaned down, fixed the girl's collar gently, and said, "Pitch it like you already know they'll say yes." That was year 1 of the mentorship program. Funded, housed, administered right here at this very branch. On Saturdays, she used to come in early, not to check her accounts, but to bring breakfast for the interns. Bagels, black coffee, a quiet kind of presence that didn't ask for thanks. Sometimes she'd sit at the back room and help them edit resumes, clean up financial aid forms, teach them how to spot loan scams. Not because she had to, but because she remembered what it was like to ask for help and get suspicion instead. Her relationship with the bank wasn't just money, it was sweat. Time, away, skin in the game. The district VP once called her the soul behind the expansion, though he hadn't returned her last 3 emails. It was her foundation that convinced the board to pilot the community-first approach. Her research, her numbers, her vision, but none of that showed on her face now. She didn't carry it like a crown. She carried it like a quiet, knowing the kind that doesn't demand recognition, but notices when it's withheld. And as she stood there, watching them forget her, watching them audit her presence like a glitch in the system, something in her posture straightened further, not defensive, just done. To be fair, she didn't look like the brochure, not that day. No blazer, no assistant. No perfectly timed arrival with someone calling ahead. Just a woman, alone, asking for access to something bigger than her appearance suggested. And maybe that was enough. Maybe the teller really did mistake her for someone else. There was a recent fraud alert on a nearby branch. A woman with a fake ID and a stolen briefcase. The report described her as tall, well-spoken, confident, sounded close enough to trigger the nervous part of the brain that doesn't wait for facts. The branch manager had sent a memo that week. Be alert. Verify everything. No exceptions. And maybe that was all it took. A protocol wrapped around a gut feeling no one wanted to admit was bias. They didn't say it, but it floated between every line of small talk. The way the teller's eyes lingered too long. The way the guard didn't blink. The way the intern stopped chewing gum but never stopped staring. None of them said the word. But they all acted like it. Like professionalism meant suspicion. Like careful meant cautious around certain types of confidence. Or maybe it wasn't even about race or gender. or wealth. Never mind. Maybe it was just about quiet. Maybe they didn't know how to trust someone who didn't over-explain herself. Someone who didn't ask for reassurance. Someone who stood too still, like power, disguised as patience. Her fingers didn't freeze. They curled just slightly, like someone had touched a cold railing without expecting it. The joints locked halfway between letter keys, and the skin around her knuckles blanched under the fluorescent light. Her breath didn't catch with a gasp. It changed direction, shifted from her chest to her throat, shallow and uneven, the way it does when the body knows before the brain admits it. A faint tremble passed through her wrist. Not enough to shake the desk, but just enough to make the monitor reflection jitter. She didn't blink, and that was the giveaway. People blink when they're normal. She had stopped being normal 30 seconds ago. The manager reappeared behind the teller. Slower this time. No clipboard, no urgency, just the quiet panic of someone realizing they'd read the whole situation backwards. He took half a step forward, then stopped himself, like even getting closer now felt inappropriate. "Ma'am," he said, his voice flatter than before. No longer friendly, just raw. "I believe we've made a mistake." His tongue clicked softly as he paused, as if tasting the weight of his own words. The woman didn't move, didn't nod, just stood there, eyes steady, letting the words echo back at him like a hallway with no end. The teller tried next. Her voice came smaller. "Breathe here." "I'm sorry," she said. She didn't finish the sentence. She couldn't. Her throat had tightened too much to push the rest through, and the silence that followed wasn't forgiving. It was instructional. A silence that taught you something. A silence that lingered in your spine long after the apology was done. The woman still hadn't spoken, but somehow, her presence had said more than any rebuttal could have. It didn't ask for revenge. It didn't even ask for understanding. It just stood there, unwavering, while the system behind the counter cracked one glance, one breath, one curl of the hand at a time. She didn't cry. She didn't flinch. She didn't even blink faster. But something in her gaze folded inward, like a page in a book being turned quietly before the sentence had finished. It wasn't anger that passed through her. It was recognition, a quiet, aching familiarity, as if this moment, this exact flavor of doubt and distance, had happened before. Maybe not in this room, maybe not with these people, but this type of moment it had a taste, the kind that coats the back of your throat, bitter, thin, cold, acunon. The counter in front of her now felt different, less like a surface, more like a wall. Her fingers flexed once, then stilled again. But this time it wasn't calculated. It was resignation. She looked around not at the staff, but at the space. The way you do when you realize a place you helped build no longer has room for you in it. The same tiles she funded, the same chairs she ordered, the same security cameras she advocated for to protect young interns, now watching her like a stranger. And the worst part wasn't the mistake. It was how easily it happened. How automatic. How no one even considered she could belong here until the screen told them she did. Like her humanity had been pending approval the whole time. The apology didn't land. Not because it wasn't real, but because it was late. Because it came only after the system finished scanning her for errors. She didn't need an apology. She needed this not to be normal. And that's what hit the hardest. Not what they did, but how familiar it felt. It's easy to define people by what you expect them to be, by what they wear, how they ask, whether they fit the mold your training manual told you to trust. But expectations are not evidence, and caution is not clarity. She didn't demand recognition. She didn't announce her name. She didn't weaponize her resume. She waited. Let the silence speak. Let the system expose itself. Because the truth is, some people were never meant to impress you. They were meant to evaluate you, and in that moment, she did, without raising her voice, without lifting a finger. Because how you treat someone before you know who they are says more about you than it ever could about them. If you've ever walked into a room and felt it shrink before you even said a word, if you've ever watched someone scan you not to understand but to eliminate possibilities, if you've ever had to prove your right to exist in a space before you were allowed to speak, then you know exactly what this feels like. It doesn't arrive with shouting. It arrives with silence, the long kind. The kind that hums between questions that sound polite but land like warnings. A glance too long at your shoes. A pause before they say your name. The kind of smile that was trained, not meant. And by the time they realize they were wrong, the correction feels too late, not because you needed validation, but because you noticed how quickly they had chosen doubt over dignity. If that's ever been you, don't let it rot quietly. Say it. Say how it felt. Say how you held your breath. Say what they missed while they were too busy looking through you. And then say what you did next, because sometimes the most powerful response isn't louder, just more precise. You don't need to know someone's story to treat them like they have one. You don't need a title on a business card to offer eye contact. You don't need credentials to give respect. What you need is awareness that behind every calm voice is a lifetime of reasons it stays calm. That behind every steady hand is a memory of the times it had to hold itself still. That behind every quiet woman asking for something simple, there might be 1,000 moments where she was denied it for no good reason. We talk about empathy like it's a soft thing, like it's a bonus trait for the gentle, but the truth is, empathy is structural. It's how systems survive without rotting from the inside out. It's how institutions stay human. It's how power stays honest. And the cost of ignoring it isn't just losing good people, it's losing your compass. You don't owe kindness to someone because they look powerful. You offer it because you understand what it means to be ignored. Or at least, you remember what it felt like. If you forgot, she just reminded you. She didn't raise her voice. She raised her phone. A simple unlock. Fingerprint. Ping, then tap. Not dramatic. Not rushed. Just deliberate. The screen lit up. Sterile white. Cleaner than anything in the room. Her thumb moved like she'd done this before because she had admin access. 3 levels above branch authority. Full override. She didn't look at the teller. First to one. She didn't need to. She was reading the room. Literally, no names. Serena Renana no one. Terminals. Branch ID. One more tap. The screen flashed red. Employee access suspended. One by one. Teller. 1221. Manager Ikinan. Backup login. Pitacher frozen. Quietly. The way winter arrives. No noise. Just cold. The manager blinked. Wait, ma'am, I think we... She cut him off with a breath. Not a word. Just a breath. Deep, firm, measured. The kind that says, I could explain, but you wouldn't understand it the way I earned it. Then she looked at the intern. The only one who hadn't spoken. His face was pale. Not from guilt, from recognition. He had seen her photo before. In training. Maybe. Or on the foundation's wall. Somewhere. His jaw tightened. But he didn't look away. And she nodded. Once just enough to say, you remember. Good, Romanama. And that was all. No announcement. No lecture. Just clarity delivered like ice through glass. And with that, she turned. Not with haste. Ninnar wanted. With conclusion. Because some people don't leave the room. They finish it. She didn't slam the door on her way out. She didn't need to. The silence she left behind was louder than anything she could have said. And the system, it didn't break. It just revealed itself exactly the way she expected it would. So now the question isn't what she did. It's what you saw. If this story hit something real in you, if it reminded you of a moment where you were judged before you could speak, ignored before you could finish, or doubted because you didn't look like the answer, then don't let it sit in silence. Say something. Drop your story in the comments. Hit like if you've ever felt invisible in a place that should have seen you. Subscribe if you believe quiet power speaks louder when we speak together. Because here at Unveiled Wealth, we don't tell stories to entertain. We tell them to expose, and we can't do that without you.